Hi, my name is Antonio Bisano. I'm a co-director and co-founder of Marcel Mauer Architecture. And welcome to the second episode of our Marcel Method mini-series. So as explained in the first video, we decided to produce this mini-series of videos to share the way we work. So hopefully we'll work together in the future. Or if you want to use our method to do your own student project or professional project, then we will be happy to contribute towards a kind of open source movement in architects' work efficiency. So the second episode, this episode is about references. Although we are all about remote working and paperless office and digital buildings, we actually love books. We love books because there's something to do with the time it takes to read books, which gives the reader enough time to test whether the ideas resulting from the reading itself are any good. So we start reading an interesting book, we come up with ideas, and after we come up with a new idea, we've got 300 pages to go through, and we have time to test if the idea was any good. So in a way, it's kind of similar to design, this kind of reiteration process. So this is just the tip of the iceberg, but it's enough to get the conversation started on certain topics. The first shelf is about climate change. Well, because climate change is the elephant in the room. The first book I would like to start from is written by Extinction Rebellion. You know who Extinction Rebellion are. It's called This Is Not Drill. Published by Penguin, is a very well written and very compelling case for action. The second book is The Sixth Mass Extinction by Elizabeth Colbert, a story, writes a story of extinctions. So life on Earth has gone through 5 extinctions. This is the first extinction, the 6th, in which a mass extinction is actually triggered by a single species. Homo sapiens. So the book is really interesting because it gives somehow the proportion of the change that climate change is imposing on the biosphere. Next, we have a truly terrifying piece of writing. It is by David Wallace Wells. It's called The Uninhabitable Earth. And it's no more than just taking the IPCC report findings, so the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change scenarios, and explain really what the numbers and the graphs mean. And the prediction for 2030, 2050, and 2080 are scary. They should trigger action. And Charles Eisenstein then is the last author of the first section on climate change, and from his bibliography, we would pick up Climate, a New Story. So a bit of a positive note to end the first shelf, and is about creating a non-dualistic way out of climate change. From climate change, we move on to system change, our next shelf, and here we find primarily economists, but also political commentators and other authors. We start from the Canadian, very famous Naomi Klein, well-established author. We would pick up This Changes Everything, the Shock Doctrine, and No Is Not Enough. And from Naomi Klein, we will then jump onto Jeremy Rifkin, American economist, really good writer, very sound researchers underpinning his writings. And from his bibliography, we pick up The Empathic Civilization, The Third Industrial Revolution, and The Zero Marginal Cost Society. So Rifkin it makes a hell of a lot of sense, and you should really be following what he does, what he writes. US, France, Thomas Piketty, The Inequality, on Inequality, and Paul Mason, British journalist, political commentator, Post-Capitalism, on how capitalism might have reached, let's say, the end of its natural course of action. Mariana Mazzucato, Italian stroke American economist. The Entrepreneurial State is the book we recommend by Mazzucato. And then David Graeber, Bullshit Jobs, really interesting account on how jobs are created sometimes to keep the top and the bottom of the pyramid apart, rather than actually to contribute to an effective labor management system. Then we end up again on a bit of a positive note with Giorgio Monbiot and Out of the Wreckage. On personal change, so we do climate change, system change, personal change. Now, personal change normally is the bit in the bookshop where you find some weird and fluffy stuff like, how to improve yourself in 100 whatever. So, we are really about scientific grounding in whatever we study. So the only title we have in this section is by John Rates and Richard Manning. It's called Go Wild, and it's fantastic, really beautiful book on how little our body has evolved from our ancestors, hunters and gatherers, and how much culture has evolved, most of the time for the worse, in the way we sleep, we eat, we exercise. There is so much that we do that it goes against the way our body is engineered, and it has been engineered by evolution over hundreds of thousands of years. We move then from these kind of personal changes to history, evolutionary psychology, and psychology. We find Daniel Kahneman thinking Fast and Slow, a very famous book that I think earned him a Nobel Prize, and is about how the mind works. Jeremy Lent, hands down, my favorite book of the entire list, The Patterning Instinct, of how human societies create meaning through narratives. A great myth or a great religion or a great ideology, and through those narratives, found ways to find meaning in their agency. Then on to quite a fashionable author, Yuval Noah Harari, Sapiens and Homo Deus. And then Johan Hari, who is a journalist who kind of pulled together in the book called Lost Connection a lot of other scientists' work on how disconnection from community, meaningful jobs and natural environment is causing a pandemic in mental health. And we end up with Nicholas Carr, The Shallows, and the book is really nice and is about how non-linear reading, so the opposite of books, non-linear reading such as social media and internet, make us stupid. It's very simple. So non-linear reading causes an excessive stimulation of the short-term memory, which gets oversaturated, whilst the long-term memory hasn't got the time to fix the neural path in our brain. So as a result, we are constantly stimulated by small little stimuli, but we don't really have the time to develop critical thinking and empathy. So the role of long linear reading is really quite important. We have just 2 titles on philosophy because philosophy would be an enormous shelf. So we only picked Bertrand Russell in Praise of Idleness, but Russell is one of our kind of imaginary godfathers. So we could pick up anything from Bertrand Russell bibliography, but we decided this one, which has to do with leisure. It has to do with spending less time working and more time developing culture. And then Ken Wilber, The Theory of Everything, which is really the most important introduction to integral theory. If you don't know what integral theory is, go and check it out. It's a bit too long to explain in a short video like this. We picked a couple of titles from Post-Colonial Studies. So it is by Remy Edo-Lodge, Why I'm No Longer Talking to White People About Race, and by Akala, Natives, Race and Class in the Ruins of the Empire. Now, both books are extremely well written and extremely important for all of us to understand the history of inequality and the history of privilege, and what something like Black Lives Matter mean in today's systems. So we've got Physics and Complexity is the name of our shelf. The first one is James Lovelock, The Gaia Theory. If you don't know what the Gaia Theory is, Wikipedia. Jeremy Gleig, Chaos, which is a really nice book written in the 70s on the emergence in the 60s, 50s, 60s and 70s on chaos theory and fractals and complexity and nonlinear effects. Really nicely written book. And very important because we need complexity in order to, from complexity, jump onto ecology, which is all about complexity, and then from ecology come back to architecture in a new and regenerated way. We've got Carlo Crivelli, The Order of Times, a really nice book by an Italian physicist about time and how wrong and narrow-sighted is our appreciation and understanding of time. Time behaves very differently from the way we think it does. Time at certain speed kind of slows down. Time at certain scales is no longer relevant. It doesn't exist in a way. So Nassim Nicholas Taleb, very peculiar character between philosopher, mathematician, and stockbroker. Really interesting author. Is the trilogy really is Anti-Fragile, The Black Swan, and Skin in the Game. So all of these three titles are about the application of non-linear thinking and complexity theory to everyday's life. And in a world destroyed by very low probability, very high impact events such as COVID-19, reading Taleb is quite timely. So we actually like to spicy up a little bit our list with some practical stuff. So we start with a book by Georges Monbiot called Feral, which is about the effect of rewilding in the UK. So if you're interested in concepts such as trophic cascades and nonlinear effects in ecology, Feral is a really good book to read. Then we have a book by Mark Decay called Integral Sustainable Design, Transformative Perspectives. Now, this book is packed with very useful tools for sustainable designer. Unfortunately, it's not really well written. It's a little bit academic, a little bit clunky. So what Decay does, it takes integral theory as developed by Wilbur and others and apply that to sustainable design. What comes out, as I said, is extremely, extremely useful. Not too kind of jazzy, but still extremely useful. So I would read it. And then we have those kind of little handbooks: Permaculture Principles and Pathways Beyond Sustainability, and Creating a Forest Guarded by Martin Crawford. And then Paul Heaney, Home Farm, and Julia Watson, Low Tech Design by Radical Indigenism. Particularly the last title is a real treat. It's about indigenous and native technology that allows human desires, human needs, and ecological intelligence to continue side by side. We couldn't really help not putting a couple of titles on the shelf coming from the more traditional architectural theory and architectural history background. We start with Le Corbusier vers une architecture, and I think what's really good about Towards an Architecture is it is a manifesto. It has the clarity and the vision of an attempt to change the current paradigm. Now, we might not agree entirely with the modernist agenda. We might not entirely agree with what modernity has left as a legacy, yet we can't overestimate the importance of this book for what architecture has then become in the 30s and 40s. Then we have Richard Sennett, Building and Dwelling, a kind of famous, important title in the theory of architecture. Jona Friedman, The Architectural Survival. Again, we go back to the 70s and the intelligence of frugality and ingenious design. Jane Jacobs, The Death and Life of Great American Cities. A big title, enormously important urban planning author. And then Charles Montgomery, Happy City. So I managed to do that within 15 minutes, which is brilliant because I tried to record this at least 4 times before it was all beyond 20 minutes. So thank you for following me until this point in our little marathon of Marcel Mauer reading list. By all means, this list is bound to change. It changes every month, but I hope it gives you at least an initial understanding of how important reading is to us, to critical thinking, and how accustomed we are to search outside architecture for those emerging patterns that might give architecture the new energy to go beyond and evolve towards the new paradigm. So thank you for staying with me, and I will see you soon in the next episode of Marcel Mauer Method. Thank you.